Welcome everyone to the Marketplace of Ideas Third Thursday Constitution event. I am Tani Ferrarini from Lindenwood University in St. Charles, a part of the greater St. Louis area.
And I'm Kate Johnson from West Virginia University. We're both economists, but that doesn't stop us from being curious about our political and civic institutions. One thing that binds Tanya and me together as colleagues is that we have a profound respect for the rules, institutions, and rights that enables us to lead relatively free and productive lives. Tanya can speak more to this, having started her career studying with Douglas North. As part of introducing this event, I need to thank Tanya for having the idea to put together this stunning lineup of thought leaders who care deeply about constitutional issues and helping others learn more about them. I'm very excited to be part of this program, if only to help move the conversation along.
So welcome everyone to a lively conversation about the United States Constitution, a love-hate relationship. This event is a part of the H.F. Langenberg Speakers Series. We are honoring Walter Williams tonight and his commitment to understanding the Constitution and making it relevant to general audiences. To give the Constitution the attention it deserves, we bring together John Stossel with Axel Kaiser and Jeff Nelson. Our goal is to have a lively chat and a spirited discussion about the importance of having information about the Constitution and understanding why rules matter in the context of our modern society. So what makes the Constitution such an important document? Isn't it outdated? Doesn't it discriminate? Though we do not seek to answer these questions, we encourage you to contemplate many questions like these that will be raised this evening and start your conversation about the Constitution. Questions about rules and regulations are important to ask and answer. Douglas C. North, a Nobel laureate and my mentor, taught me this, as well as other institutional economists. So this Saturday, everyone turns in the nation to celebrate the Constitution on September 17th, the day on which the Constitution was signed in 1787. Educators everywhere are tasked with connecting young people with the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Let's get resources into their hands and encourage them to introduce them to our young people. I, for one, cannot deny how fruitful on net the Constitution has been in successfully helping people throughout the nation. It's been a great success. It has helped hundreds of millions of people from the cradle to the grave connect with wealth and growth opportunities unimaginable to the people who cobbled together those original 4 pages of parchment and original 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. Sometimes successfully, and other times not, the U.S. Constitution has served as a model document for other countries. We have learned over time that a good, simple Constitution is but one piece of a very complex system of institutions. Kate, let's get the Constitution started and give it the attention that it deserves. Let's get started.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. A quick comment about tonight's program. It is straightforward. An open and robust panel conversation will follow a quick introduction of each of tonight's participants. Moderated Q&A will follow. To submit questions, please use the link provided in the chat. At the end of the program, information on how to stay in touch and access our favorite picks of constitutional educational resources will be posted.
Okay, we want to thank our sponsors, and information on how to connect to them and collaborate with them will be provided at the end of the program. So as we get started, let's chat about these panelists. John Stossel is our first person, and he is an Emmy award-winning journalist who has been in media since the 1970s. After a successful and exciting career, he left television to start his own company, which creates educational content for students and other citizens. John has been called TV's original provocateur. His consumer reporting on corrupt business practices and coverage of government waste, corruption, and abuse of power are well noted. On ABC's 2020 and Good Morning America, he exposed many questionable business practices and those of government agencies. After ABC refused to show or air some of his content, he hopped on over to Fox, where he enjoyed 7 good years. He left Fox, and now he has started his educational content and impressive journalistic website. His accomplishments include bringing sound economic thinking to millions of YouTube followers, and more than 1 million teachers and young people have benefited from leveraging his educational resources on Stossel in the classroom. He's an author. He has 2 books that went on to become bestsellers. I will leave somebody to put the titles in the chat. They're very provocative. John joins us to share his career highlights, and he wants to bring attention to the Constitution and why he's committed part of his media efforts into prompting others to understand it and understand the challenges that they face if it is changed. He will help us tease out the similarly interesting stories of our other 2 guests. And Kate, why don't you introduce Axel?
Thanks, Tani. Axel Kaiser, he's a political scientist, a thought leader, and an author. He's the president of the Foundation for Progress. It's a wholly liberal think tank in Chile, and the Frederick Hayek Chair at Top University in Santiago. Sorry, Axel, I get nervous and I can't say the names in Spanish without sounding like a total gringo. Okay. He has written several books, many opinion pieces, and perhaps more importantly, in this day and age, he's made himself available for long-form interviews. For those that are interested in a deeper conversation about some of these ideas but don't have the resources to invest in reading the academic literature or even reading a full-length book, it may be just the right kind of media to meet that need. One of his recent efforts has been a laser pointed at helping the general population of Chile understand what constitutional reform means for them. Less than 2 weeks ago, on September 4th, illiberal constitutional reforms met a resounding defeat by popular vote. So I hope that Axel will tell us more about that. My only regret is that we're not in the same room with Axel right now. I have had the pleasure of being in the room when he speaks, besides being intellectually delightful and me being delighted with the pieces he weaves together. I truly enjoy the amount of attention his words garner and the energy and excitement it creates among those in attendance. Now we're on Zoom, but it is our desire that each of you in attendance feel free to send questions to the chat so we may ask them of our panelists later in the program. Connie, can you introduce Jeff?
Absolutely. So now we have our 3rd panelist, and it is Dr. Jeff Nelson. He is the Executive Director and CEO of the Russell Kirk Center for Cultural Renewal. Through various posts ranging from serving as the Executive VP of the Intercollegiate Studies Institute and founding ISI Books, he has dedicated his career to educating citizens and promoting civil and religious liberty by covering cultural, economic, political, and educational issues. Jeff holds a PhD in American history from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. A prolific writer, educator, and scholar, he has published several books, including Redeeming the Time by Russell Kirk. And with that, I would like to push it off. And Kate, you're next.
Okay. So now that we've introduced each of our panelists, we'd like each to take about 5 minutes to speak about what inspired them to do what they do, to promote conversations and the appreciation of the Constitution. We believe that this will be the first time that John, Axel, and Jeff have had a chance to speak to each other on a panel. And we would like to give them several minutes to continue the conversation before we start with ours and your questions. At about 5 before the hour, John Stossel will make an announcement, say his good nights, and share how to stay in touch. Axel and Jeff have agreed to stay with us for a few more minutes and keep the conversation going. And
here we go. So, Kate, thank you so much for summarizing how this event will roll out. So let's hear directly from John, Axel, and Jeff. we'll pop up during the transition if we have any questions or if people start to take too much time, but let's give it a try. John, let's start with you.
Okay. I started doing this because I wasn't as smart as you and most of your students, and I had to atone for my sins. I attended Princeton, but managed to learn nothing about the Constitution and about the idea of liberty. I came out being taught by authoritarian, sort of central planning professors that we know what works now. We just have to have experts at government direct it. And I won Emmy Awards along those lines, 19 Emmy Awards, bashing businesses, saying we just need a law. The media loves that. And only really 15 years in did I discover classical liberalism. And what an epiphany. So, oh my God, these people get it. I'd come to see that the liberal media I grew up with was not solving the problems. The laws they passed to solve consumer problems would just create new problems. I turned to the conservative press, and they seemed to want to go to war against everybody and police the bedroom. So discovering libertarianism in the form of Reason magazine was, oh my God, these people get it better than I do. And this changed my life, and I decided I now have to explain this to everybody, and once they hear it, they'll get it. And this is so important because almost 8 billion people on Earth now, and for less than 1 billion of us, life is our level of good, and for 1 billion, life really sucks, and for the 6 billion in between, it's often not so good. And why? Why do some countries do well when others don't? Why do the same people, same ethnic groups move places, and under different governments, they prosper? And Milton Friedman taught us how Hong Kong illustrates that. Chile's going through it now with their idiotic progressives in charge saying they'll probably come back wanting yet another vote on some almost as bad constitution. And it's hard for the politician to grasp the concept of limited government. And Tawny, I agree with everything you said except for one thing, which is that this Saturday everybody will be celebrating the Constitution on Constitution Day. But in fact, nobody will be celebrating it practically, except maybe this crew, because America has worked pretty well and people just aren't interested. And you can make the point that why should they be? We've got this document written on old paper. The language is arcane. When this was written, Black people were described as 3/5 of a person. It was all written by men. I see why young people say this isn't super relevant today. But we have to ask the question, why did this one country several hundred years ago make it and do so well for us? And a lot of it is because of the limits on government power that are set in the Constitution and are now being ignored often, which we can talk about it. I try to talk about these things now, as Tawny said, on Stossel TV. We release a new video every Tuesday. I certainly don't mind leaving the networks because their news programs now reach a few 100,000 people. Even the top-rated Fox show reaches 4 million people, and I think some of them are 100 years old or already dead and just still have the TV on. But we're reaching more than 2 million with each short video. And I like that. We're reaching some people who hadn't heard about these ideas. So I'll stop there and go on to Axel.
Axel.
Okay, thank you very much for this invitation. So I decided to become a public intellectual and to be, in the front line of this battle many years ago. probably not many people know in the United States that Chile was the first country in the world to democratically elect a Marxist president, Salvador Allende, in the early 70s. And of course, they tried to, introduce communist dictatorship in the country. In the end, the whole project collapsed. And we went to a different kind of system, a free market system that was created by the so-called Chicago Boys. These were Chileans, young students who had studied at the University of Chicago under Milton Friedman, Arnold Harberger, and many others. And they made these reforms in Chile, and Chile became the most prosperous country in the history of Latin America. And this was because they imported the ideas, the classical liberal tradition of the United States into Chile. And they also created a constitution in 1980. And this constitution, of course, was reformed several times with referendums and many other things, many other reforms in Congress once democracy came back, right, in the early 90s. But the left, the radical left, never abandoned the project of, achieving total control over people's lives. Basically, they never abandoned the dream of having a revolution. And they worked, throughout decades. They took over institutions, crucial institutions such as universities, schools, and also the media. And in the end, they managed to persuade many people that, this system was unfair, it was racist, it was, completely oppressive, and it was only benefiting a few rich people at the expense of the rest. And what happened was that we gradually started destroying or undermining this free market and classical liberal institutions. And because the narrative was controlled by the left, in the end, people started believing really that the problem was the free market and freedom, and the solution was the government. And I understood all this, and that's why when I came back from my PhD in Germany, I finished it, and I said, okay, I'm going to do an academic career, but not a full-time academic career. I'm going to be a public intellectual, and Milton Friedman was my greatest inspiration. And so I started fighting these people on television, and then I became very famous, very popular, because I was one of the first ones beating them, on public television with arguments. And then I became more, well-known also in the whole of Latin America and Spain. I started writing books. I got death threats. I got, attacked even in Switzerland because I was, speaking there, and they didn't allow me to speak. Some groups of people, Antifa type of people, and it was all over the news. But, I think that that better than we do. Freedom is not free. And what happened in the end was that on September 4th, this year, 2022, most people realized after 1 year of the far left controlling a constitutional convention, where they drafted a new constitution in order to create a completely new country. This was fully, in the tradition of identity politics and socialism. 62% of the people rejected that project. They woke up and they understood that they had been lied to, and that they didn't want to live in a country that were, dividing people by race and, playing people against each other. And so in the end, in the poorest neighborhoods was in the country, the reject alternative, so the no to the new constitution, got the largest percentage of votes. And the same goes for the indigenous populations in Chile. They voted against the new constitution, in spite of the fact that it was offered to them as, a new document that would bring the time back to pre-colonial, to the pre-colonial era, and they would get back their territories and so on and so forth. So the left was completely crushed. This project was completely destroyed by the people, and they defended their constitution that was inspired in American ideals of freedom, and that has been responsible for the, most interesting and most formidable period of progress in Chile's history. And we played a huge role, I think, in that battle, in winning this referendum. And I tell you, and I will conclude with this, if we had lost that one, we had, got rid of our current constitution and replaced it by the constitution they wanted to introduce in this country, I don't think we would have escaped civil war. I think that would have been the fate of our country, or a very harsh left-wing dictatorship like the one you see in Venezuela right now.
Okay, and Jeff.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
And I just want to say a quick word of acknowledgement to Walter Williams. It's so great to hear his name and to be even a very small part of any program that honors his memory. He's a very great man, and had the chance to meet him a couple times. Like, I'm sure you all know him better than I did, but I learned a lot from him, and I'm glad you're honoring him this evening. Well, my interest in this whole question, I'm a historian, so I'm not a policy guy. Although I appreciate those elements, but from afar. I came alive as a young conservative libertarian hybrid, and was very passionate about the whole question of liberty, and especially the question of educating for liberty. How does one educate for liberty? Reading Tocqueville, you come across a number of pregnant passages, one of which struck me early on was that where he said each generation is a fresh people, and that's obviously true. So the task is, how do you make and engage a constitutional tradition for each new generation so that they make it their own, they enter into the tradition of American constitutionalism. And I want to say that for me, the constitutional tradition was the thing that sort of fired my imagination. When I was in high school, I thought the whole Miracle of Philadelphia thing was a little hackneyed. Once you get into the sort of the depth and the not just the depth within the document itself, but the trajectory of constitutionalism all backed and behind it through the many documents and the many civilizational experiences that informed our Constitution, the whole question of the miracle just really resounded and was very, much more powerful and real to me. And it's something I always hope to, pass on to students. It's sort of the romance of the American dream, the American experiment in ordered liberty. The great mission of America and the history of the world is to provide an example and to provide a working model for the reconciling the tendencies, often at variance with each other, of order and liberty into something called ordered liberty. And it's very unique in American history. It's very precious, and it's worth conserving, notwithstanding some of the qualifications that John Stossel raised. I think, in terms of getting the students interested in the tradition, it's worth just reminding them this is a big, complicated question of where it came from, why it took shape in the way it did, the questions that it engaged in the way it did, how federalism and the separation of powers and all that emerged and took hold. It didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't sui generis. It didn't just happen in 1787, right? I mean, America has both a written and an unwritten constitution. And I think putting out that in the beginning is important. The written constitution, John waived it, and that's our sort of provides for certain practical necessities and is our key document. But behind it is all a series of documents. And Americans, as we know, we're not a blood and soil people. Our identity in many ways are forged and dependent upon these documents and these traditions. And so the Constitution is so important to our identity as a people still. And no matter the various countries and experiences that where people came from over time and adopted it, but it's been the idea of and contained in these the ideas contained in these documents, the Constitution, and behind it, of course, the Declaration of Independence. Not so known, dealt with anymore. The Articles of Confederation were approximate cause, and it's still a document to pay attention to. The Northwest Ordinance, very important, I think, in our constitutional tradition, is often lost. The state constitutions, there were 10 state constitutions by 1777, well before the end of the war, let alone the constitutional formation. They're very interesting and suggestive in understanding where our key document tonight we'll be talking about came from. The colonial charters of liberty. They're incredibly interesting to read. These charters of liberty that were written in New England and Pennsylvania and Virginia, very thick with religious and economic and political liberties, and they're working out in those documents that informed the Constitution. British constitutionalism itself, the Magna Carta, the Petition of Rights, the Bill of Rights, they're part of our constitutional tradition. We wouldn't be a constitutional republic without drawing on those. And then I think the ancient inheritances that the founders drew on from other civilizations that informed their thinking about the Constitution, human nature, etc. Jerusalem, Athens, Rome, all very heavily drawn upon. These are part of our written constitutional tradition. And then quickly, there's the unwritten constitutional tradition, which is the founders also believed were very important, and they talk about in their letters and other documents. What is the unwritten Constitution? It's a complex, Russell Kirk talked about it in terms of a complex of customs, conventions, habits, understandings, compromises, social arrangements that have been commonly accepted over time. And that provide basically about 9/10 of the ordinary functions of a civil social order. And remaking the constitutional order, sort of, the unwritten constitution and the written constitution are both been weakened in our time. Probably the unwritten first, and then the written follows. And these both have really presented us with a tremendous challenge, both in terms of the preservation and the conservation of a cherished document, but also in any attempts to reform or change it, which the Constitution allows for, and which conservatives and classical liberals know that change is the means of our conservation, as Burke said. So, but it's a delicate, preservative approach. So that's what fired me up. All that history and approach and thinking about Constitution is this grand, wonderful, amazing tradition over time that coalesced in Philadelphia with these 55 delegates in a miraculous way, and has left us still with a strong constitutional order that gives us a modicum of order, justice, and freedom, which is unlike any in the world and unlikely to be in our time.
So,
Jeff, it's exciting to hear the enthusiasm which you approach these historic documents and the excitement you get from them. And once I came of intellectual sensibleness, I started to worship them too. But what do you say to kids today who rightly say, this isn't relevant to me? This was written by old white men. Actually, they were pretty young, a lot of them, but this was written by white men, and it's not relevant today.
Well, I think it's an accident who it was written by, whether they were white or pink or green. I mean, you have to look at the wisdom that contained in it, the practical achievement that has sustained us both, as a commercial republic and as a federal republic, and has, basically allowed for, even in the midst of tremendous inequalities and injustices throughout the centuries. I mean, we've had civil wars, we've had populist uprisings, we've had cultural revolutions, and still the Constitution bends but not breaks. So there's something that allows for change and reform. I think that we have to always talk about the difference between reform and change. You can reform something and still preserve its essence, and without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So that's what you try and get your students to think beyond the narrow reductionisms of race, class, gender, which I think that in my experience, they get there pretty quick because they're kind of tired.
And Axel, just Chile is a wonderful and horrible example. It's so great that you left the ivory tower and entered the fight. We need more people to do that. But I was blown away years ago in Chile that you got a private Social Security is unsustainable in America, and Medicare. It just can't be paid for because people my age rudely refuse to die, and the politicians just won't face up to it. So we have an enormous bankruptcy coming, being ignored. But in Chile, you voted for a privatized Social Security system, something libertarians tried to achieve in America. And Chile got even richer because of that. You people prospered. They had little savings accounts. They could say, this is my money. The government can't take it from me. And I thought, okay, this will convince the world. And yet it didn't even convince the people in Chile, who then rioted because big banks took too much of their Social Security accounts. And I don't know what else they were complaining about. And likewise, in this case, although the Constitution got voted down, it got over a third of the vote. And these leftists will come back with a slightly softer version. And it's appealing. Equality. Some of these rich people have so much more than you do. It's not fair. And that will always be a good argument that will appeal to socialists.
Of course, and but it's very interesting because Chile was the first country in the world also to privatize Social Security, and that model was exported afterwards to many other countries. Not enough, in my opinion, of course. But the founder of this system, Jose Viñera, who's a Harvard PhD, he was inspired in the founding fathers, and you can read his writings at the time in the early 80s. What was the philosophical inspiration, and it has also been my philosophical inspiration. And actually, I was reading these documents recently that I bought here because if we want Chile and Latin America to be prosperous, we have to emulate the United States. And if the United States wants to remain prosperous, it doesn't have to emulate Latin America.
I'm listening to Axel and John Stossel and Jeff Nelson.
So yeah, I mean, the Social Security system, it's a really interesting case of people not really understanding how benefited they were from the system. Actually, one of the reasons why people rejected the new constitution is because in the last year, the debate made it clear that people really owned the funds that they were saving. So most people didn't even know that the savings that were being put into an account on their own name belonged to them. So there was huge ignorance among the population. And of course, demagogues and populists came and said, oh, these corporations are stealing your money. And that undermined the credibility of Social Security in Chile. But once they realized that they were the owners of their savings of this money, not as in the pay-as-you-go system, they didn't want to lose it, because the new constitution that the left proposed really put an end to the system. And so people were going to lose the money they had saved for decades, and they said, no, you cannot go against my private property, and I'm not allowing that. And they went and voted against the constitution. So that was one of the reasons why the constitution was rejected. But I will add something very briefly. So my point now is, why is it the case that so many people in Chile did not realize that the funds that were being saved belonged to them? They didn't know it. And that's the problem with, let's say, the center-right, or whatever you want to call it, conservatives. They do not engage in a battle of ideas. So the only narrative that prevails in the end is the leftist narrative. And our people are only writing, papers for index journals that no one reads. And that's my problem with not having enough public intellectuals. We have to emulate Milton Friedman, and we have to go out and explain people how reality works.
Why do people want to write for journals that nobody reads?
Because they have an influence over time. They do. I mean,
it's
some of
prestige.
The most important journals in the history of the world have been, relatively small. You just have the right, a couple of hundred people over time. The ideas work through the body public, and they make a difference. So you got to believe in that.
I tend to disagree. I think in some cases that is true of some people, but most papers that are being produced nowadays, and I myself publish some papers, so it's not like I'm not doing that at all. They are not having an impact, not really. I mean, there are some people who have an impact, yes, but most of them, and they could have more of an impact, the same scholars, if they at least in addition to writing papers, went on television and defended the ideas in a way that people could understand, right? Like Friedman used to do. But if you only write the papers and then the public intellectuals are all on the left and the teachers at schools and the journalists and the artists and the Hollywood stars, then it's very hard to win this.
Your expectations of a policy journal versus some sort of an education or philosophical, cultural journal are probably different. I mean, the time frames, in terms of impact are different. Policy, you're looking for a quicker hit. Cultural, political, philosophical, you're thinking in 50-year blocks. That's basically the way it works.
Yeah.
But the vast masses are the ones who are going to be voting and influencing the children. And I can just say from years in TV, when I go to interview people on the left are better talkers. Women tend to be smoother talkers than men, and a lot of people on the left are women. Often the people who try to explain, certainly economics, my interest, they are so stuffy and boring and screened through university boredom that it's very hard to find people with a twinkle in their eye who are excited about how good this is for people.
You're not going to get a twinkle with mathematics and, all the stats and stuff like that. You're right. I mean, economics is, shot itself, and needs to reground itself. I mean, it can be humane and imaginative and interesting and fire you up a little bit, but it's not as it's usually taught.
But that's why
common sense economics is a whole different thing. That's the exception.
Yeah. But that's why I like Milton Friedman, because he understood that it was important to write books like Free to Choose, Capitalism and Freedom, to go on talk shows. And he was, I think, the most influential public intellectual in this, in the last century for free market thinkers. I mean, for the free market camp. And Chile is a very good example of that. When the center left felt threatened by the very radical left-wing constitutional project that we just rejected, then they came out and started defending the system. And that was also one of the crucial reasons why people voted against the new constitution, because it was really extremely radical. Like, it was really undermining democracy in a way that would have been irreversible. But so we need these public intellectuals, and we need television, and we need artists, and we need all of this people, because in the end, if you lose Venezuela, for instance, let's say, you have, in the short run, you lose Venezuela because you elect a Chavez who is promising paradise. Then you have 20 years of a dictatorship or even more. So you have to be able to fight that back in an effective way. And just an additional point, James Buchanan and the idea of saving the soul of classical liberalism. And that was a very, I think, powerful critique towards classical liberals who speak mostly about economics in very academic terms, and also understand economics in the sense of the homos economicus. And I think that we have made a mistake in focusing too much on that.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you, Axel, about that. I published a book when I was a book publisher for 15 years ago called The Literary Book of Economics. That sold 10, 15,000, 20, which for a small little independent press was a lot. It was reviewed everywhere, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. It has been taught in classes, it was adopted in classes. It did really, really well. It just took short stories, poems, whatever, and then it followed with basic economic lessons, free market economic lessons. It did really, really well. I mean, it's just one kind of approach to more humanistic, more humane, not so deadening. Economics is. I was an economics major. I did economic history as an undergraduate. I was taught by Jesuits. They tried to force socialism down my throat, but somehow I found my way around it. And a lot of it was through, literature. It was, and I think students respond to this. I'll say this, and then is that they like economics when it's taught in an interdisciplinary way, right? Because most of the students that we come across are not economics majors, so they're not really into the micro and macro and whatever. But so if you're going to get to them, they have certain biases from the humanities, which are all bad. And so, to get to them, you really do have to kind of re-script it, use some of the humanistic tools and incorporate economic lessons with them. I think that's one way. But I think political economy, and that's coming back into vogue, and I think in a really good way, is more interesting to them than just mere economics. And you can do a lot more with it. So sort of, thinking along in an interdisciplinary way, reviving and continuing to revive a little bit more economic history, the political economy, and then just basic economic teaching for the vast majority of students would go a long way to demystifying it and also sort of enlivening it instead of the deadness that it is today.
Yeah, and we need the stories, right? Like good stories, like
stories.
Ayn Rand, for instance. Ayn Rand had a huge impact because she was a novelist, not because she was an economist.
Right.
So that is all something we need, the movies and the novels and all of that. And we don't have
in addition to Stossel TV, students they're all watching Netflix, Prime stuff, whatever, streaming stuff. So the videos, they just want, it's what they want. So you're right. And narratives and stories are important.
And speaking of that, Axel, you mentioned Venezuela. Isn't Venezuela and Cuba, aren't they useful? Don't we need models of failure to be able to say, look at that?
We can use them. It's of course a tragedy that we have these cases, and especially in the case of Venezuela, for instance, it was the country with the highest score on the Economic Freedom Index in 1975 in Latin America, and it was number 12 or 13 in the world, and now it's the last one. And what happened was they lost it gradually. And then when Chavez came to power in 1999, they were like in the place number 80 or something like that in the ranking, the Fraser Institute. No? And then you have a dictatorship with horrible conditions for everyone. And the problem is that young people, the younger generations, they do not really believe the stories that you tell them about Venezuela, or that could happen in Chile or could happen in the United States. I mean, that it's something that no one really believes, or a few people believe. So I think it's useful, yes, and it's powerful, but we have had Cuba for how many years, and still Venezuela happened, and Argentina is a huge mess, and then Chile almost happened again, that we destroyed our constitution to have a socialist one. So yes, it's useful, but it's not enough.
It's amazing when you talk about failures, because I do think that negative examples are good. I agree with John, and there's a lot to teach. But when it comes to contemporary failures in South America, or the failures of the last century, the terrible legacy of the 20th century in terms of totalitarian regimes and hundreds of millions of people wiped out by their political leaders and regimes. Completely forgotten by students. I can't tell you how many, even now from very good schools, and some I probably shouldn't mention, that advertise themselves as America's current conservative school. They don't know. Even just the Cold War may as well be the Peloponnesian War to these kids. You're just starting over, and even with and they don't believe you. They don't believe you. I had students just the other day tell me, no, that's not right. The student, and this is from a conservative group school. The communists they're well-intentioned. Sure, they got some things wrong, obviously, but in general, their ideas were good. They just didn't get applied right for whatever reason. And they really believed that, and fervently, and facts just did not sink in. I don't know if it's because of the modern technologies they're looking at, or videos, and I don't know. It's easy to blame things, but maybe that's always been the case with young people. But for the most, but it is troubling, and for what we're trying to achieve here tonight, it's a real challenge and hurdle.
I naively thought this would change all that. That I don't see how the kids in Chile can say, well, it's not happening in Venezuela, because isn't it on their feeds?
And the interesting thing is that kids, the younger generations, are the ones who are more inclined to believe communist stories or socialist stories. In Chile, they vote for the left. They vote for Boric, our current president, who is an admirer of Nicolas Maduro. And they voted for the new constitution. And it's especially true, what I'm saying, for the upper income segments of the population. So the ones who go to universities. And they are very much influenced. You would never believe the amount of celebrities that came out in support of the new constitution in Chile. Peter Singer, Sting, Pedro Pascal, Viggo Mortensen. You had Susan Sarandon. You had, of course, intellectuals like Thomas Piketty, Joseph Stiglitz. You had Roger Waters. You had so many coming out in favor or supporting Boric and the new constitution. You wouldn't believe it. And of course, that has an impact on young people also, you know. And that's something that is really important. That's why I say this result in the constitutional referendum in Chile is not only something that was crashing for the Chilean and Latin American left. It was devastating for the progressive movement across the Western world. Martin Schulz, the former president of the European Parliament, before the referendum, came out and said that Chile was showing the way for the world with this new constitution where feminism, ecologism, and ideas of, indigenism and all of these things were being taken into account, and the world was watching Chile. Mark Ruffalo, the actor of Hulk, same story. So it's really incredible, and of course it has a lot of influence on the younger generations. So it's hard to compete with that.
This is not new. It's always been the artists and the intellectuals. And what's up with them? What about their brain makes them get it so wrong? Why does almost anybody who's an engineer or a home builder get it right? I mean, certain things about your background make such a difference.
Art engineers construct things, and artists want to emancipate things.
Yeah, and
I want to emancipate things.
No, they want to be. No, you don't. Not well, maybe you do. That's fine. But I mean, you're within a frame. I mean, I expected there you have some sense of order as well as liberty. But these libertarians, these artists don't. I mean, they want to explode this for some universal revolutionary impulse to remake the world. And provide for maximum autonomy, destroy all traditional institutions, destroy religion, destroy all the things they just, I guess they think are war against their art or their expressivity or whatever. I mean, obviously we're being simplistic or reductionist, but to some degree there is just that temptation or that tendency within that community, and frankly they're probably not that well educated beyond what their craft, which they may be amazing artists and all these American, celebrities or European celebrities coming out for the Chilean Constitution. They probably haven't. Have they read that whatever it was, Axel 388,
articles?
Articles in this. I mean, are you kidding me? This always happens with the French Revolution. Every new it would happen here. Change the Constitution, have a con. It would be get a committee. It would be a 500, 600 page, document, which we know that. We know all that. So this is part of the reason why we want to keep it. At least the 55 white guys kept it brief. That's a blessing.
Yeah, it's very emotional. It's a very emotional thing, and then it's also because you don't teach students at the universities about the history of communism. No one teaches them in the United States, in the West in general. There are few courses that teach you. The horrors of communism or what the ideology was all about. And so you have this utopianism that it's very easy to sell to younger people, because it's very hard to sell the status quo to the younger generations. They want change. They want to feel, something, that they're something special, and that Che Guevara and these people represent this idea of a better world. And so, that's why I think it's so appealing, the socialist rhetoric, the narrative, and the idea that you're going to be a good person if you endorse these ideas.
Well, you're always pushing the frontiers of emancipation, right? And freedom. And in this case, it's political, it's economic. Now the war is against human nature, right? And we know, we don't have to get into that tonight, but, we know all the ways in which that is happening. And it's happening in laboratories in Silicon Valley with, genes and mixed up DNA and everything going on. And it's happening with the gender stuff. So, I mean, it's just ever push to be free. There's never enough satisfaction to you, sort of blow yourself up. That's about that's maximum freedom. But that's, they're not probably as committed to be that kind of nihilist, so anarchist. But this is where we go. We're pushing the limits, and it's vogue. I guess it, plays well with music and plays and whatever else. But it's a temptation that we have to avoid. It's a utopian temptation that's been evident for all of humanity, and it's certainly been racing forward since the French Revolution. That this commitment of transformation of human nature, society at all costs, at every possible way.
On that note, because I'm going to have to leave shortly, let me just talk a little bit about how your students can win some money, and if they're good at this, and explain a little bit about what brought some of us together here is the Stossel in the Classroom charity that Rob Shemens runs. That years ago, teachers would call me and say, "Gee, I wish I taped that ABC special because I want my students to watch it." And so over 25 years, we started doing that and making some videos specially for young people. And we do, as Tawny mentioned, reach 1 million students, 100,000 teachers, get to more millions of students. And we have a contest every year. And this year we're giving away $25,000. We have 3 topics. The first is the Constitution. How does it affect us? Should it be amended? Second, inflation. And your students explain it and describe how it impacts people. And finally, they can write an essay or make a video. This is the new thing. Then the kids can, on their computers, can do what I used to do with a $250,000 camera and editing equipment and 2 or 3 union thugs to do. The students now can do this, and my goal in life now is to find someone who's good at it and will replace me doing our videos weekly. So I encourage you to try to find someone. The topics for that are real life examples of economics in action, maybe budgeting at home, a business trying to prosper, government policy like loan forgiveness, or innovations like crypto, and any of that interests them, they can do. And the deadline is, when is the deadline? March 31st, 2023. So it takes a long time to make a video. Now is a good time for them to start.
If I was a college kid, I'd jump at that. Is it high school or college or both?
Both. High school, secondary, and we have different categories. So the high school students compete against other high school students.
Gotcha. That's great.
That's exactly what everyone, I mean, what the free market movement, the classical liberal movement or conservative movement should do to reach to young audiences like you are doing, John. I mean, we have tried that, and we have done that with the think tank I'm leading, the Foundation for Progress in Chile. We reached to 5 million people in the past year, on social media and using, target marketing and things like that to mobilize them in order so that they could vote against the new constitution. And in the end, 53% of young people between 18 and 32, I think it was, voted against it. So that had an impact, I think. And that's exactly what we need to do in order to preserve freedom. So they don't only hear what the professors at the university say.
Okay, well, thank you for letting me in on this discussion, and Hammond University for what you do.
Well, thank you, John. We appreciate you, and we bid you farewell. And everyone, we'll push out the Stossel in the Classroom contest. Okay.
We'll spread the word too. Well,
thank you.
Happy to spread the word to my number of high school-oriented groups I work with, and also college.
Yeah, well, the university professors took a hit in this session, which I appreciate the constructive criticism, but we are trying to make a difference inside of our classrooms. And one of the things that Kate and I and others like Jeff are committed to do is to make accessible all the incredible teaching and learning resources. Axel has written a book. It's only available in Spanish right now. We're encouraging him to have it translated so we can share it with our audiences, but we can also share it with the Hispanic audiences throughout the United States. I'm going to let Kate ask a few questions, and let's continue the conversation.
Yeah, so just to be clear, Axel's written many books. So Axel, you are the most intellectual, non-intellectual, like, and
Non-academic.
I wanted to defend Milton Friedman got a lot of credibility because he was a good scholar. And that's something that you do as well. And so I just wanted to just give a little bit of credence back to why do we publish in esoteric journals, or partly because some of those arguments have to be won there. But so I have a question. I'm going to start with Axel. I mean, I'm not playing favorites, Jeff, but so we'll come back to you, Jeff, for the next question.
You can play favorites.
No, but I'm just really curious.
Favorites are important.
This is a question for.
I support Axel as a favorite.
Yeah,
he's becoming my favorite listening to him.
Yeah. If Chilean voters didn't want what was offered, what do they want?
Well, they know what they don't want, of course, which is socialism and completely insane wokeism. Because what the new constitution was all about, I think it was, the undoing of Western civilization. That was basically it. And you read it and you will be completely convinced. All the debates you are having in the United States, identity politics and all of these things, feminism, they were all in our constitution. Like they were the defining spirit of this constitution that we rejected. And so people want a united country. They want, liberal democracy. They want an independent judiciary. They want a social market economy. That's the way they think about this. That was very clear. And they don't want to have separate races, because one of the things that this new constitution tried to achieve was to separate us into two different groups. Chileans on the one hand and indigenous people on the other hand, right? Which is also nonsense, because everyone in Chile has indigenous ancestors, but still there are some people with a larger percentage of, indigenous ancestors than others. And they try to create autonomous territories for indigenous people. They try to create a parallel legal system that would allow them to use their own traditions, even in criminal cases, and so on and so forth. And what was the surprise for the members of the convention that were bringing these ideas from the United States and Europe? It's not like they came up with this. Over 70% of the Mapuches, for instance, in southern Chile, the main indigenous group, rejected the new constitution because they want to be Chileans. They don't want to be something different and separate and that is going to be in some conflict with the rest of the country. And that's what Chileans want. They want their flag. This was also a huge part of the reason why the constitution was rejected, because the members in the convention were speaking against the national symbols like the flag, and they burned it. And they did even more horrible things. I cannot describe this because they were really horrible, like obscene. And people realized, they are up to destroying the country, and that's why they rejected it.
Thanks. I know that was a tough question, but thanks for that answer. So, Jeff, this relates a little bit to what I asked Axel. The U.S. Constitution seems to be under attack these days. Has this always been the case, or is this something new?
Well, first of all, I totally agree with Axel was saying very interesting about the whole question of the place of Western civilization and all this. But has it always been the case? Well, sure, there have been pretty stark disagreements. There were vicious fights in the late, even after the Constitution was ratified in the 1790s. Of course, you had the Jacksonian uprising. Jackson wanted to trash the Electoral College, a bunch others, and so that's a current thing. It was so. I think these things, the progressive attacks on the Constitution, the progressive agenda to remake or replace the constitutional order with something different has been going on for a long time, 100 years or so, at least. So I would think that the struggles, and I think this is just the nature of a democratic republic, you're going to struggle over meaning, identity, particular interpretations, and that's probably, it's healthy as long as it's, not done with guns. I think that for the most part, that's a good sign, a healthy sign, a vigorous sign that the republic you're engaged, to some extent. You're thinking about the Constitution, and we may come to different perspectives on its legacy, its history, what it means today. John Stossel brought up some of the usual stuff, which is legitimate. I mean, we have to hear people and where they're at and how they respond to the Constitution today, and not discount their views and what they say. I think that's very important, and I think we have a lot to learn in every generation about how to make the Constitution what the good and the perennial qualities that have secured a modicum of order and justice and freedom over time for everybody, while also realizing the shortcomings, as we all know, and we talk about a lot. I think we talk so much about the shortcomings these days, we don't really talk about sort of the blessings and the miracle part of it, and what it has provided and what it continues to guarantee for us, even with all the challenges and the shortcomings and the injustices, and how it has been changing. And I think for the most part, in a good way. There's obviously some of the progressive changes I don't agree with, but at any rate, so yeah, I think it's just an ongoing conversation and democracy. This Constitution is 235 years old this year. It's survived, and I don't think it's going anywhere, and that's a good thing. And we got to be good to each other when we talk about these things, right, Tony?
Exactly. We've got to bring the spirit and the emotion into a good space, so we're helping each other and not harming and hurting others.
I'll ask the next question to both of you. So if you're still warm, Jeff, jump in. Axel, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I'm all excited. I'm fired up. Let's go.
Yeah. So we keep hearing that students have short attention spans, and that classical or serious works won't make a dent with them. And do you agree with this? And if so, what should be done? And if not, which works do you think are effective?
Well, so I also used to teach at the university with the Hayek chair, Adolfo Ibáñez University. It's very hard to pronounce when you're not native in Spanish. But I would ban completely iPhones and computers and laptops and everything in my class, because I knew if they are using these technologies, they would chat or whatever. They wouldn't be focused on what we were discussing. I think it should be banned also at schools. I think France did this because the iPhones and the mobile phones are a huge distraction, and people should read from paper more than from the screen. That's also my opinion. There are some studies showing that's even more effective, and it's better for the brain. Even I don't know. I'm really not sure. I've encountered many different students. Some of them have, long span of attention, and they're very much into learning, and many are not so much into reading, a lot of complex texts. But I think maybe that has always been the case. But I'm hopeful, in a sense, because I'm seeing the impact that we are having, and also. I agree with you, Kathleen. I mean, the academic work is very important. I don't want to come across like someone who is saying, "Oh, this is useless." I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we have good scholars, very good ones, and I think people who are capable of winning this war on that level. But we need more people on the public sphere, more people coming out. Even these scholars could do more. On the as public intellectuals, I think. So I mean, I'm hopeful, because if we keep doing things like what John was doing, what we do here in Latin America, or what we do in the US with the Center for Latin America, Atlas also, and the Archbridge Institute, trying to convey this message of the American dream to Latino communities, I've seen it has a lot of impact. many times we don't win this because we are not really fighting it. And when we do, we have a good chance of winning.
Well, I guess this is becoming a reoccurring comment, but I agree with Axel. I think that's really well said. And I love the fact that you're as hopeful as you are. That gives me hope to hear people like you who are as hopeful in your sphere, seeing what you see is confirmation to me. And I'm a hopeful liberty lover. So I really enjoy students and being around them. Yes, I think they do have attenuated attention spans relative to the past. Not all of them, obviously, it's as Axel said, but I think in general you do notice that a bit, or more than a bit. It's a reality. I think there's been such a high degree of educational malpractice. I mean, these kids are as smart as ever, but they haven't been educated, quite the right way in high school. So they come with. You have to do so much more remedial work. You have to bring them up on historical knowledge. You have to bring them up on economic knowledge. You have to bring them up political. It's just everywhere you go. The gaps. The gaps are big, and it's not their fault. This is a problem of the secondary education, and then the politicization of higher education and professors that use their students as agents in their political cause, rather than as an end, rather than teaching them that learning is an end in of itself. So I think this is kind of a problem. But students, the good students, they want books. After conferences, I've been giving surveys, and I asked you, afterwards, would you like us to send you a reading material in e-form, online, or an e-book, or would you like a printed book? And almost always they say, don't give us printed books. We want books. Real books. Everybody gives us on ebooks and stuff, but we really like to have that, and we're okay. We get those, we read them, but we really want books that we can have in our library, that we can hold in our hand. As Axel said, there is something about human connection with the word that is better sort of expressed when you're actually reading it and holding it in your hand than online or on text or on a screen. So I think that's hopeful. I think students can sit and an hour and a half engaging lecture, ask good questions. Tawny's been to many conferences that I've held where, the students sit there for a couple hours and they're listening and they're engaging, and then they're spending all day talking back and forth, and it's exciting. And so I think that doesn't, if they had such a bad attention span, that wouldn't happen. So I would say that's, excuse me, sorry, bye. Entering and breaking and entering here. So I think hope is the right word. That I'm hopeful that in the younger generation, I still trust them, and I still think if we get the right resources in front of them, and they're compelling, they're not boring, that they're well done, that they will engage, and we can get them committed to interested in our tradition, traditional liberty moving forward.
Yeah, I have to say I'm enjoying both perspectives, and I'm having you two together. I'm getting a better vision of this, and I have to say I haven't been fighting the fight. I have been trying to get compelling materials in front of my students and getting them to engage. And I find that students are just fantastic. They want to connect. They want to figure out how things work, and they want to be talked to. They know the world's complicated, and they don't mind digging in. We all have a tendency to want to make things simple, so I like both perspectives. So
I don't think we should sell them short. I don't think we should say, oh, they have a short attention span, so we shouldn't give them, a common sense guide to economics. No, I mean, I think. You give them common sense economics. You give them Thomas Sowell. You give them Hayek. You give them Kirk. You give them whatever, Tocqueville, Burke, because once they need to be a little habituated. They may take a little time for them to read a sentence by Edmund Burke or by Hayek or whatever. But they'll get it. So let's not sell them short. Let's raise them up.
Yeah. So now for some subtleties. So Jeff, you mentioned that the U.S. has both a written and unwritten constitution. So the UK, on the other hand, has only an unwritten one.
What, the UK?
Yeah. Do you see an advantage with the US system? in guarding rights?
I think we have the best of both. I mean, obviously the founders worshipped the British Constitution. They thought it was the greatest achievement in all of human history. They weren't enemies of the British common law tradition. They all read Blackstone. They all read Coke. They all read all the great thinkers in that tradition. So, but I think for us, having a combination of a written and uncovered is right for us. But our national identity, we needed to, at that point in time, to lay down certain fundamental principles and the kind of way in which we were a constitutional people, and that was, in a written form. So I think it's been durable, right? I mean, in its way, we all know it's the oldest written constitution in the world. So I think its durability probably speaks to that for our national experience and our expression of the constitutional tradition that preceded us and, our unique contribution to it. The written constitution, and, with understanding that there was also this unwritten constitution that went alongside it was part of the genius of it, really.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
But they need both. Many nations have a written constitution, right? And Italy's about ready to have another government, and they're going to write another constitution, right? Chileans writing everybody's writing a constitution. They're gone like 10 years later, 15 years later. So this unwritten constitution is which is the British part of it, which is a really understanding of the importance of precedent and customs and conventions and habits and, the compromisings and social arrangements that have been worked out over time that and commonly accepted are super important, fundamental. They're the pre-political and cultural foundations of our constitutional order. And we're a little weakened in that commitment in our time, but we can't be if we want to maintain the achievement that has been American ordered liberty.
Yeah. Do we have a minute? I would like to ask.
Yes, absolutely.
Please. I was going to ask if you want to ask each other.
Yeah, Jeffrey, a question, because maybe I'm wrong, but I think that if you take a look at the American history and the founding of the American Republic, you had this founding idea of moral equality, basically. All men are created equal. And so then you had a civil war because you had to really deliver on your promise. Everyone is created equal, right? Then you had the civil rights movement, same thing. Martin Luther King never thought of the founding fathers, as far as I know, as being horrible people who created an institution.
Quite the opposite.
Quite the opposite.
He's considered a conservative even by blacks now, who are
And so my question is, when you take a lot to the United States, I spent some time at the Hoover Institution, and my question is, don't you think that there is something different this time in the cultural wars that are going on? Because I'm not sure that what we are seeing now, where you see so many people, influential intellectuals, politicians, and artists, sports people, whatever, who are basically saying this document, the Declaration of Independence, represents something, an idea that we consider evil. So it's really a kind of not reaffirming the promise of the American independence and the idea of America, so to speak, but it's basically trying to get rid of it and trying to destroy it and replace it by something completely different, which is this nonsensical identity politics story, which would divide and destroy the country, in my opinion, right? Because this is not a narrative that can work and bring people together. So you think there is something different there, or would you say this is, well, another chapter in this long, history of different groups clashing?
I'll be in a Berkey, and I'll say both. I think the intensity of it, certainly with the addition of social media and others, is different. Although, I mean, I wasn't very old during the 1960s, but I started coming through it, and then in the 70s, and the new left, the rebellions, the fires, the riots, the burning down, burning the Constitution, burning the documents, burning the bras, burning everything. I think, that was all a big trash and, a scorch earth on the American political tradition as well. There were massive, there were big assassinations of, multiple people. We haven't had that, thank God, yet. I think this is an extension of the sort of the trajectory of the radical assault on the foundations of the American, experiment in order of liberty, but also this whole question of where is the locus of power and authority? How do we the whole question of human nature, because human nature was a big, obviously the Federalist Papers and others really think a lot about how we were created. You mentioned natural rights, that we were endowed by our creator, but that was embedded in a larger natural law foundation, which ensured that, an understanding of rights is not being derived from the king or from parliament or from Congress, but from God. So that necessarily limited them. There's no limits. I think you're right. It's been a relentless progressive assault that's gotten worse and worse. The 60s and 70s, it kind of muted a little in the Reagan years and turned it into the university through the political correctness movement and multiculturalism, and then you saw that sort of move on and explode in some ways into the woke revolution now, but and the race, class, gender stuff. So I think it is a progression that's gotten more intense, that with the lack of historical awareness or attachment or commitment or experience of the American dream, it's gotten more dangerous, and it feels more like hey, this is really going to turn this thing over once and for all. This is more like the French Revolution, where we're going to restart the calendar, and we're going to, we're reordering everything, and we're making everything new again. I think the Constitution was the product of experience, right, rather than theory. I mean, theory was important, but it really was, as I went through everything, a product of experience. And that's the main reason why it's endured. And if you don't enter into that experience, and that's not part of your own, you're going to be a prey to false panaceas. False panaceas of economics, economic centralization, political centralization, transformation of human nature, toss it all out, it really doesn't matter. It's all injustice, it's all white, it's all black, it's this and that next thing. So that's a discourse to say. I think there's a progression. I think it's very intense. I think it's real and dangerous, partly because the unwritten Constitution is so weak now, that these pre-political and cultural foundations are so weakened that now, that even more so than in the 60s and 70s, where you could rely on people who came alive with a pretty solid educational, experience. They came. It was just different. They had religious formation. They had, they were involved in their civic. They understood civic involvement and community involvement. And they understood the political order, and kind of what they were dealing with. Now, the ignorance and the illiteracy is so high at every level. So I'm worried about it. I am worried about it. But with you, I am still fundamentally hopeful that'll endure still.
Yeah. So Jeff.
Sorry, I know that was a little long.
No. I just want
tough question.
I just want to turn it a little positive and ask you. So something that I've observed. We're probably the same age, but do you think that, being that the United States is a melting pot and we have so many people come from different places all over the world, that we do have a kind of social cohesion with new immigrants who believe in the American dream? And
I do. I think that's always been. It's always been.
That could be
in times of
something
trouble, they've been a blessing.
So sometimes the diversity can lead to lower numbers in certain indexes, right? But it could be that all this diversity is really helping us keep it together in the face of what you're talking about. What do you think?
I think there are immigrants that have come in, and I've seen and we see them in cities that are, Asians and coming from Africa and from Eastern Europe and around the world, China, Asia. They really buy in. They really know. They've studied. They have to pass a test, and the test is, we at the Intercollegiate Studies, when I was at the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, administered a national test on civic literacy. And the basic test was just basically drawn from the questions that immigrants have to answer when they want to become citizens. And it was shocking. It was like 20-30% of students could answer the test. I don't know, not to be negative again, but immigrants get it. They enter into it, and they also are bringing a certain thick cultural experience from their home countries, because those countries tend to be family-oriented, community-oriented, businesses and families and cultures and communities and religion. They all sort of mix together and bond. And I think that is a source of strength for America, and it always has been. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, thanks. So I like that you guys are asking each other questions, but Tani?
Yeah, I want to ask each of you, how can we teach and educate others on, you know, the benefits of having limited government? I mean, we've talked about the negative aspects, but let's talk about what it is that we do want our government to do in a limited capacity.
Well, I think we can hook them up with it. There's a great infrastructure in the classical liberal conservative movement of organizations that provide resources and conferences, seminars that can help bring students into it. Because let's face it, they're not, for the most part, going to get it at their state university. There's a few conservatively oriented universities, maybe 10 or 12 in the country. But so I think it's kind of exciting to see the proliferate, a great division of labor that exists across it. I mean, you have high school programs. If you really want to get into core documents and teaching teachers and students, you could look to the Ashbrook Center in Ohio or the Bill of Rights Institute that's focused obviously on the Bill of Rights, but the larger constitutional tradition. There's a kind of niche little group that's doing some nice things called Save Our States. They're focused on the Electoral College. Who's teaching students about the importance of the Electoral College? We lose the Electoral College, we don't have a democratic republic the way. So it's like one of those things that's being fought, but it's a sideline fight, but it's very interesting, and there's a lot of positive things going on at Save Our States that I would say. James Wilson Institute, the Heritage Foundation has good things through the DeVos and Simon Centers there. Videos, students love videos, right? PragerU is doing some good stuff. Hillsdale College has got a lot of videos out. ISI, I mentioned, the Intercollegiate Studies Institute has a lot of resources and publications and seminars and college newspapers. So there's this Young America's Foundation has the Reagan Ranch, and they're teaching the Constitution, and they've got Governor Walker from Wisconsin is now the president there, and he's doing all kinds of cool things educationally. The Leadership Institute and the Fund for American Studies in Washington have tons of good stuff going on for young students to engage. I mean, you can get a whole education, you know, you really can. These students, the Hertog Foundation in Washington, they do a lot of high-end, smart, long summer schools for ideas and things, but they're really done some impressive things. So I love Claremont Institute, obviously, is big in this space. So I think that if you're a student and you realize it's not happening at your school, you can go to these other organizations and kind of get the education you deserve. And also, I think, meet other like-minded students. I've seen it happen so often, you might even meet a future spouse that you might have common minds, common places, common beliefs, hey, you know, marry into this. It's great. Go for it. So, you know, I think that there's a wonderful opportunities that are out there for conservative students and libertarian students. Classical IHS obviously has done amazing things and continues to, although they're working a lot on centers and faculty stuff now. But still, I think that if you want an education in liberty, it's out there. You may have to work a little bit, but you take one or two steps into this world, all of a sudden, you know, I've just seen students, their whole lives change. They get so excited about, you know, reading these authors that nobody's had them read. And maybe they had to read Plato a little bit, but they don't read Plato and Aristotle like we do in our tradition. They don't read, you know, Cicero, and they don't read, you know, Burke and Tocqueville and Smith and Hayek and Kirk and the others important thinkers. So I just think that we really got to kind of connect them. We got to be connectors, because there's a lot out there that you can connect them to. We don't have to make it all up.
So Axel, let's turn to you. What are some of your successes, and how did you make what Jeff was talking about more palatable for the ordinary citizen?
Well, we created a whole movement in Chile, and I would argue even in Latin America with our friends in other countries, that didn't exist like 10 years, 15 years before. Like you said Hayek, and people would know Salma Hayek, but they would never know who was Friedrich Hayek. And now you have hundreds of thousands, and I'm not exaggerating, of young people who know or who have read some things from Hayek. And I think we have to work a lot, and this is what we have done, and with very successful with social media like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, and then you can reach to very young audiences, because they are not going to read, you know, the foundations of, the Constitution of Liberty. They are going to to want to see a rap between Hayek and Keynes, maybe. And I think that was brilliant. And we are doing things like that. And we are also offering the more profound and intense courses with professors and teachers at our think tank, what Jeffrey was saying. And because there are always a crowd of people who are interested in learning more deeply about these things. And then they become opinion leaders, they become, CEOs, they become professors at universities. So it's crucial that they have access to these contents that they don't find at the universities. I can tell you that, at least not in most universities. And so that's one thing. And then the power of having charismatic, public figures. I want to go back to that, because if you see the success that we have had in Chile, it has to do with the fact that you have people like myself going on television and really confronting the other side, and you present yourself in a way that it's attractive for the younger generations. It's the same in Argentina with Javier Milei, who is screaming on television that we should abolish the central bank and that taxes are theft, and he could become the next president of Argentina. I hope so. But he's so charismatic and so intense, and a little too radical for many people. But he has created a whole movement that didn't exist in Argentina, a country that's I think it's like 100 and something in the economic freedom index, in the bottom 10%. And so I think you need faces, recognizable, charismatic faces, and people like, let's say, on the conservative side, like Ben Shapiro, for instance. He has a huge following and has a very large impact with the Daily Wire. Whether you agree with him on everything or not, it's a different story, but he does have a lot of impact. Even Joe Rogan, who is not necessarily a classical liberal, but he's a reasonable person, he has a lot of impact. And even Bill Maher, who is on the left, but he attacks or criticizes the woke left a lot, and I think that's very, very important that he does that. So on our side, we need more people doing also this type of work, and on television, media, and social media.
Yeah, conservatives need a William F. Buckley Jr. again. Somebody like that. Somebody can bring everybody together. I think social media kind of, I don't know, pushes people in ghettos. Even celebrities like you were mentioning, all of them are good. That they get pushed into little silos and their own companies or their own projects or silos or whatever. But they don't. They don't connect. They don't cross over. It's kind of interesting.
But no, you would be surprised. I mean, we have some measures of people who were on the left, not the radical left. Some of them even on the radical left, but they started watching YouTube videos of things we were saying on YouTube because a friend of them sent it or whatever, and they then crossed to the free market camp. And we have that, and in the foundation, we have in our think tank, we are, trying to keep record on how many people we managed to convert from the anti-freedom, ideological part of the spectrum to the pro-freedom, camp. And it's more than you would think. And also, it's important because many people who don't know what to think go on social media and watch YouTube, and if you only get the message of one side, then probably you're going to go with that. And so it's important that we have a presence there. Yeah,
I agree. We need more video. I think that's a weakness. I mentioned a couple places that do videos, but we can do a lot more in that area. We need to do a lot more. I should say, I'm going to get in big trouble because I didn't mention in my list of valuable resources in the Liberty Movement, a place you got to go if you want to learn what it means to be a classical liberal or a conservative, and that's the Russell Kirk Center in Nebraska, Michigan. So we got it all going on here, a lot of fun and a great educational organization. So the website's in the box there. I won't say more than that. At least I got out there. So
no, that's great, and this actually is a great stopping point, and we want to thank both of you, Jeff and Axel. This has been a great conversation. And of course, we want to say a special thanks to Kate. But John left us early, and we've been talking a lot about the importance of getting videos out there. So my call is to all of you, encourage people to connect with the Stossel in the classroom, enter the contest, video and written, and let's get these ideas out there. And then I think we're going to just go ahead and conclude today's program unless we have any additional questions. I'm looking online. Kate, do you have anything that you want, that's pressing that you want to ask?
Well, I did want to thank our co-sponsors for the event.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so besides our tremendous speakers, and by the way, Axel, if someone tries to donate to your think tank, it's very hard to do.
It could be done by Atlas Network in Washington.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure. And the Russell Kirk Center also takes donations, don't they, Jeff? Or are you independently wealthy?
We are independent and we do take donations.
Okay, all right. Okay.
And Stossel in the classroom also takes donations.
Yeah. So we also have, everyone I'm going to mention is a not-for-profit, so you can also donate to any of these groups that sponsored tonight's, we're co-sponsors of tonight's events. That's Adam Smith Works, Free to Choose Network, the Mississippi Council on Economic Education, the Bill of Rights Institute, Economic Episodes in American History, Northwood University, West Virginia University, the Gortney Institute at Ottawa U, University of Western Georgia, New Jersey City University, Concordia University, Wisconsin, and Concordia University, Chicago. So,
and of course, our respective universities, West Virginia University and Lindenwood University.
Yeah. Thanks.
Go.
Thank
Okay.
you for the invite, Tawny and Kate. What a fun time to be with you all again, and you have such a wonderful program and mission here. So best wishes to you moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And as our program concludes, please seize the opportunity to continue the conversation virtually and in person. Think about the spaces and places you can bring this conversation. If you're interested in getting additional resources, please reach out to us at the Hammond Institute.com or .org, excuse me. CommonSenseEconomics.com is going to provide a list of beneficial resources from the institutions that were just mentioned by Kate. So again, it has been our pleasure. We support you. We support your quest to learn more about the Constitution and its relevancy in a modern context. Please, if you're a registered participant, check your emails. We will be sending the useful links so that you can continue the conversation. You can bring these discussions into classrooms, into community events. And with that, we conclude our evening. Thank you, everyone. Stay connected.